Welcome to SolarWinds Day. I'm Crystal Taylor, Tech Evangelist for SolarWinds, and today we're going to be talking about some of the results from our IT Trends Report 2024, which covered AI and its role in IT. And we're also going to be covering our AI by design principles and some other exciting things about AI. And to help me do all of that, I have Sai Krishna heading up our engineering here, and Colin Childress heading up product management. And we're going to talk about all things kind of AI in our products, in general in technology, and what we kind of think those trends are looking at and what we're doing moving forward. We'll kick things off kind of with, we've got some facts and figures here. So from our report, 65% of organizations invested over $5 million in AI technology, with 31% over $25 million. And that is a really large number, right? We know AI is super popular right now. Everyone's talking about it. There's all this generative AI stuff becoming popular. So with those budgets coming out, like, have you guys seen like a focus on anything that people are doing with AI?
Firstly, it's not at all surprising that there's a great amount of investment that's going into AI, and the fact that there's so much interest in AI adoption, right? Like those things have been very, very front and center for us, if you will, especially over the last 18 months since the first release of ChatGPT. But if you take a step back, AI itself is not new. AI has been in IT environments, in our products as an example, for a long time. And as folks who build products that go into IT environments that deal with a lot of data, things like metrics data, because we're looking at things that we're monitoring in a variety of environments where we need to pay attention to a lot of data. So things like, for example, ability to look at anomalies in those data, or the ability to look at and forecast issues that may happen before they actually happen. So, for example, if you could have a very expensive disk that you're using, and you want to know well ahead of time before the disk saturates, so you can go look at it, place an order if you need to, replace them. Like these types of kind of use cases have been around for a while. Also, things like when something does go wrong, because we're all as IT professionals dealing with such complexity of data, we have tool sprawl, container sprawl, application sprawl, now machine learning model sprawl, like all this is just flooding us with a lot of data. So, shall we say the first generation of IT applications, which required a human being present all the time, having complete access and control over every little parameter, those days are going away and they're gone. Now there's just so much data that a human alone is not able to kind of have that level of control, which is where AI comes in. So when something does go wrong, for example, instead of, for example, if I'm an ops person or an IT person responsible for a particular environment, and I'm accountable for the SLAs, and I get woken up at 3 a.m. because my e-commerce system is down, instead of having to comb through millions of data points, if the AI can help me with my root cause, right, and provide context, hey, this is what happened, and here's a bunch of data that will be useful for you, and here are potential, shall we say, causes that you may want to dig into, and the last 3 times it happened, these were the causes. Like these types of very, very useful assistive kind of AI-enabled assistance goes a long way in helping the ops person reduce the cognitive load on the ops person who's having to deal with it at 3 a.m. in the morning and get into, shall we say, resolving the incident instead of trying to go through the data and having to wake up 10 other people and so on. So these types of things have been around. What has happened perhaps most recently because of the ChatGPT, shall we say, revolution, is that AI has now become more consumerized, right? So instead of requiring AI professionals or data scientists and machine learning engineers who had to comb through a whole lot of data and come up with training models and so on, these models, what we call as foundational models, are now trained with so much data that they're out of the box, very, very useful. And with a little bit of fine tuning and a little bit of context that you can provide around the problem you're solving, you're now able to go a long way. So that's a shift that I see that's happened. And of course, with that opportunity, we also need to think about the pitfalls and perils and so on.
I think there's always that do more with less situation. And if any way that we can reduce cognitive load and time to resolution and all of those things, right, that's leaning right into what we want to do, which is save ourselves money and our businesses money as we go forward. I think it's important to set a little bit of a baseline. Most of what we're going to talk about today is AI ops and generative AI, but there are lots of sub parts to AI. And I think because it's become so consumerized that people have some idea of what AI is and what AI is not maybe. And some of that comes from sci-fi and some of that comes from, well, is it machine learning? Is it AI? Is it AI ops? Is it what are all of these different things? So I just want to be clear that we're going to be mostly talking about AI ops and generative AI today, because those are the things that most apply in the scenarios that we're seeing right now. So I think what's really interesting is that even though we've seen these really high budgets for AI technology implementation, 56% of IT pros want their companies to invest even more. And on top of that, 46% wish they would implement faster. Now, I think that's really interesting because we're seeing them respond that they have invested a lot of money in AI, but at the same time, they don't think it's enough. Why do you think that is?
Well, part of it is the IT ops job is becoming more and more difficult every day that that we're here. We've got complexities that are just expanding at a rate that's just astounding, while IT budgets are decreasing. And so the jobs for IT ops are getting harder and harder, and so they need assistance in order to scale, to make their lives less stressful, but also to ensure that the organization can drive efficiencies moving forward. AI can play a large part in that, especially with the tools to help, as Sai was mentioning, really accelerate time to detection of issues, reduce noise, and improve their focus to the things that actually matter, so they're not chasing ghosts, as I call it. That can allow to do more with less, that you just brought up. And so part of that sentiment is probably, I need help because my world is getting so complicated. And I'm not going to get more staff. And so AI certainly provides a mechanism in how we view it as the ability to make their jobs easier, to focus them on the real problems, and allow for driving operational excellence and efficiency, even with a complicated world just expanding when budgets are flat. And so accelerating time to detection and reducing noise so you're not chasing ghosts, accelerating and helping with assistive technology for analyzing log patterns and root cause analysis, incident correlation, so that we can remediate issues as quickly as possible is a key focus on how AI and AI ops can be applied to help the IT ops job be a little bit easier.
And if I can add one other thought to that is, in general, the enterprise is getting consumerized, right? We're all using a lot of tools in our day-to-day lives that we would like to see them adopted. So when you go home and you're using ChatGPT to find whatever, ask ChatGPT to plan your vacation to Italy or whatever, right? And then you come to the workplace and say, how can I use these tools to get my job done because they're so powerful? Of course, the gap is that in an enterprise environment where you really have to be concerned about data, privacy, you need to be concerned about how much of my information, confidential information, personal information is getting perhaps leaked into these generative models that are in the open world, so to speak. This is where I think the gap is. So there's this urge or the kind of this sentiment that we all feel, and IT pros definitely feel, that, hey, I'm dealing with all the challenges that Cullen just highlighted. How can I use these tools better, faster, in a way where I get the power and potential of all of them, but also in a sustainable way where I can put some guardrails against these potential pitfalls?
Yeah, I think, probably is a challenge most CIOs deal with is all of these new bells and whistles. We call it consumerized, but everybody is looking at the power of of the possible. It can be overwhelming. And so a balanced, structured approach on how you're going to take advantage of some of these technologies, really focused on very clear use cases and problems to solve, because if it's a wild, wild west and you're just adopting this stuff wall to wall within an organization, there are massive inherent risks, as I mentioned. And so that the balanced approach, the means of ensuring you've got a right data strategy and infrastructure and governance with those guardrails that Sai talked about are going to be really, really important. One way to initially step into that, instead of just adopting technologies and let it become the wild, wild west, is for CIOs to partner with their incumbent vendors who are embodying and leveraging AI to accelerate capabilities within those solutions, whether that's generative AI or AI ops. One example of that is kind of this assistance technology, leveraging our SolarWinds AI framework, but our generative AI engine applied to our ITSM solution, which provides agents and this agent assist methodology that makes their lives easier to accelerate time to remediation. And so it's almost implied adoption of AI and generative AI in the tools that the company uses on a day in, day out basis that can be a much more structured and balanced approach to get going versus it being the wild, wild west and you don't know what documentation and information is going out to the public models, et cetera, just to start in a more structured way.
And to expand on that, right, what can be a good structured way to think about adopting AI in an IT environment, right? The way we think about it is, and this is the way we think about the adoption, and this is the way we're thinking about like building those capabilities in our products and solutions as well. The first is diagnostic. Can you use AI to diagnose problems quickly, right, before they happen, as an example? And then Cullen talked about assistive technologies. Can AI be your sidekick? Can AI be your assistant in helping you remediate? The example that I called earlier about being woken up at 3 a.m. and something goes wrong. Can AI be my assistant in helping me? And that's where this kind of co-pilot use case is getting very popular, right? And then comes the automation, right? Once you've built a level of, shall we say, trust in the AI, once you've put all those guardrails in place, once you know that there's enough kind of risks against data, privacy, et cetera, all protected, and the AI adoption is now better in your organization or with your tools, that's when kind of the automatic or automated way of integrating AI comes in. So the way we think about that structured approach is diagnostic first, assistive next, and then automate.
Wow, you guys, you brought up a lot of things there, some really exciting upcoming stuff that just came out, the generative AI for our SolarWinds Service Desk product. You did bring that up, but something I really think that was important, we talked a lot about data privacy, but another major concern that people have is data integrity. And we talked several times about the generative AI tools out there like ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever that people are like, why can't we use it right away? I want to use it. It's going to make my job so much easier, right? It's going to help me write this thing that I'm trying to write or help me write an email or whatever. The big concern there, of course, is data integrity as well as data privacy. So what would you say, how do you address concerns of data integrity? Because those large models that are public out there, I mean, we see all the time, right? You see memes all over the internet. Oh, look what ChatGPT responded to this or whatever, right? People are using it to plan their vacations and all that stuff. And you get some bizarre results because there's a lot of junk out there on the internet, and it is pulling from kind of like the internet's worth of data. So when you're using a more private model, obviously you can cull the data and make sure that the data is standing up to that data integrity. And a common thing that we see in monitoring and observability is that data integrity cannot be called into question, right? Otherwise, your tool is called into question. Well, if this is a false positive, then everything else is in question now, right? So how do we address data integrity concerns as we're looking at implementing AI?
As you pointed out, data is at the crux of adoption of AI, right? Without good data, we say garbage in, garbage out, right? Like it's a famous kind of way to think about that. And a lot of times what we do is when we get enamored with the models and think that we can almost forget about the data hygiene, right? Like this is where the crux of the problem is. And if you ask folks who have had very good success rolling out AI in their organizations, they will be the first to point out, first go get your data right. Like, so, and what does getting data right means, right? Having good, clean data, having good data protection, whether that is privacy or provenance in terms of You know where your data is coming from, where is it going, how is it being used. Data isolation, especially in environments where you need to protect data for tenants, as an example, right? Our consumers, our customers, you need to protect and isolate customer data. That's very important. So a lot of the work that needs to happen before AI models can be effectively rolled out has to do with basic data hygiene and data practices. So having good data hygiene, what does that mean, right? Having attention to and mechanisms in place where you have a source of data and you know how the data is coming, whether you're paying attention to the basic health of the data, whether data is you see null values in your database or your data formats are correct. These types of very, very basic things, mundane things, often get ignored. So a lot of that comes into making sure that those types of practices are already in place in your data pipeline is very important. The second is having things like anomaly detection, right? Like you can detect outliers in your data. When something's not right in your data, you're able to detect them faster. So implementing these types of basic tools and practices as you build the data pipeline so that the AI models, whether that is like homegrown models or generic models, like the foundational models, which now have to coexist using, there are techniques like RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, right? Which uses your data in conjunction with foundational models to get you the results that you want. But you still need your data, whether that is in your traditional databases or in the modern vector databases, right? To have a certain level of hygiene before they can be useful. So a lot of that goes back to, and you rightly pointed out, right? When you end up having poor data, you question and you can't trust those models. So there was a famous example when COVID just came, if you recall, right? There was a lot of models that were in place just went completely out of whack because everything about what happened at that time was not natural and the model were simply not ready to process them. So, for example, when we roll out machine learning models in place, there is some hygiene that needs to be put in place to know whether those models are actually working well, right? Things like, for example, abilities to detect data drift, right? As something fundamentally, I train my model with a certain set of data characteristics in mind. Are those characteristics and assumptions still valid when these models are in production? Have a way to detect them. Are my models behaving the way I thought they would, right? I trained them to behave a certain way, and are they behaving the same way? So you need ways to detect them, right? And finally, making sure that you are getting feedback from the users of AI, and you're constantly looking at that feedback, either implicit feedback or explicit feedback, and either retraining those models or at least looking at the data so you know when the model is kind of functioning the way it's supposed to or not. Like, I think these types of practices and tools are critical before you can kind of build that trust with the data that you're using for your AI.
And it may seem overwhelming if you're hearing all of that. I have to get all of that infrastructure set with clean data integrity, privacy, hygiene, as I mentioned before, I can do anything. And so overwhelming, trying to feel like I have to have all that set before I can do anything is probably not the case. Like any product person like myself, being very focused on the explicit problem you're trying to solve, the use case, and then having a roadmap within the organization about prioritizing in smaller chunks how you can actually apply those design principles to the problem you're trying to solve. Because sometimes it might feel like there is no way I'm going to be able to do that wall-to-wall within my organization before I can even start thinking about AI. That goes back to my point earlier, just focus on the problem you're trying to solve in those specific use cases, the high priority ones, and then it's in effect a roadmap which can lead to you prioritizing all the data hygiene things along the way while you're solving those problems.
Well, with all of that in mind, talking about data privacy, data integrity, how to keep your data hygiene up, and really it's hygiene like anything else. And you build it like you should think of it as any other project that you're going to be doing, right? There's there's a point where you're spending time researching and making sure that you have all the right information. Then you're in the planning phase. It's just like anything else, even if it seems overwhelming, just because there is so much there, you still have to make all preparations that you can. And then, of course, you have to revisit. And there should be checks and balances in place. But all of this going right back to the IT Trends report, one of the results that we saw was that 40% of surveyed IT leaders and teams who had negative AI experiences, like algorithmic errors or other things, can signal data quality issues, right? And 54% believe government regulation should play a role in combating misinformation. I think that's really interesting because we were just talking about governance. Do we see governance at like a level, like a federal level, at a state level, or are we looking for governance like even internally just inside your own company? If you're implementing AI regulations, does that need to be something that is more focused at your level or at all levels, really?
Firstly, because of the power and potential of AI and the opportunities for potential misuse, which everybody's worried about, right? I think some amount of regulation is required. And I think that's where I think you can see a lot of regulation efforts, whether that's in the EU passing regulation or the executive order that Biden just passed, and the NIST that's following up on regulations and what does it mean for AI adoption in the critical systems, especially mission critical systems, is something that's gaining a lot of traction. And we're definitely likely to see more and more of that coming our way in the systems and practices that we have when it comes to adopting AI. But having said that, though, I think as folks who are responsible for adoption of tools, technologies, and rolling them out, just like you highlighted earlier about having good hygiene in terms of planning and coordinating and adoption and getting feedback and improving, those types of practices absolutely are applicable to AI as well. So as organizations think about AI tool adoption, I think making sure that we're paying adequate attention to what is the tool that's being used, what is the data isolation practices that tool's having, how do we ensure that there is good checks and balances as AI gets getting rolled out, and in terms of the feedback that we're getting and the tuning or the tweaking that we need to have with those tools with those tools or practices before we can, shall we say, roll them out for wider adoption. Like a lot of these types of things have to be in place. So one of the best things that, one of the best practices I would say that is slowly starting to gain traction in organizations that are considering adopting AI is to first get a broad kind of look at what are the functions that are interested in adopting AI, what are the top use cases, like Cullen highlighted, that the functional leaders think will make a fundamental impact by adopting AI. And then having some kind of a steering committee or an AI central, shall we say, organization that is looking at all these use cases, looking at how the various tools are being adopted, what are those tools kind of implementing, how are they thinking about the AI best practices, having some kind of an AI policy in place and making sure that those tools and practices are kind of adhering to that tool, the AI policy. I think these types of best practices are going to be very important.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that is training of the employees using those tools. You can set the policy, you can set the guardrails, but making sure training of appropriate use of the tools, but also awareness of the inherent risks, just to make sure they understand the reasons why the guardrails are in place, and just reinforcing that continuously.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think even if as we go forward, you're right. We are going to see more regulation come out. It's still a newer technology, so and government policy takes time to do all of the things we just talked about. They go through a research process. They build these big committees that go look into all of the things, and then they make policies out of that. Right? They do a bunch of research before they can get there, and it takes time to make those policies happen. So you as an organization can take those government policies, obviously, but also you can make your own policies, right? You should be looking at what do we think can be best used for, right? And not just let it be a Wild West. Just like every other part of technology, a Wild West is no good for anyone, really. It always turns out then you turn out with all kinds of things that you weren't planning for, or you don't know who has access to, or all of those things. So, keep considerations just as you would for any other new implementation of technology. You have to have the same considerations and even more considerations because it has access to other data and things like that. So all of this to say that we're talking about all the processes and regulations, and all of these things take time. And one of the things that we asked about was if people thought we should implement AI faster. And 46% of the respondents to the IT Trends Report survey said that they wish that their organizations would implement AI faster. And I think this goes back to what you said earlier, is that people need help. And so they're hoping that it goes faster. But I think something important that you both have talked about in the last little while of why we don't want to go faster is that opens you up to inherent risks. So can we talk a little bit more about kind of what those inherent risks are and why we want to take our time so that we can avoid them?
So you're absolutely right. I mean, as we think about adopting AI, you do need to have a framework that you put in place either as a practice or a set of principles that you want to consider about adoption of UI. Now, as we thought about, Cullen and I are responsible for products here at SolarWinds, and we've had a rich tradition, a heritage of smart features in our products. But especially as generative AI has now come, we've given it a lot of thought on what does that mean for our products and the experiences, and how can we make it easier for our customers and users who use our products to adopt AI faster, and how can we, shall we say, unleash the power of AI, but in a very, very useful way to our end users so that they can derive benefit from it. So recently we announced the capabilities of generative AI that we're introducing in our ITSM products as an example. And that's a great example as a small universe of, shall we say, the AI journey. Because if you look at our service desk product, it's always had very good smart features. It's had the capability of using intelligent search, right? Very relevant search. So when you search for a ticket, we just don't show everything else, but something that's meant for you. Or ticket deflection, meaning when you're looking for a particular help with an issue that you're facing, can AI suggest recommendations on what those could be before you need to reach out to, shall we say, a human agent, right? That's what we call as ticket deflection. Those types of capabilities have always been in our product. We've always had sentiment analysis as an example. So when an agent who is actually responsible for responding to these tickets or issues and is using our services product, can they look at the temperature of a particular ticket before they can respond? Like we use sentiment analysis for this. So we've had a sprinkle of all these AI features. We rolled out the example of use of virtual agents as an example, right? So all of these things have been there. And as we introduce generative AI, which is now, like Cullen highlighted, provides additional set of capabilities. So capabilities like when a service desk agent is responding to an issue, we are now using generative AI to help with constructing a draft response. So the AI then looks at previous kind of tickets that are similar. What are the ways in which those tickets have been resolved quickly, and generates a draft response, right? Which an agent can quickly review, edit, and correct before they respond. And there are a few advantages to these types of experiences. Firstly, when a service desk agent is having to respond to a particular issue, there's a lot to process. And often having somebody summarize what this issue is about and the steps that have been taken in the past that have helped to address this issue faster is incredibly powerful. So that's a great example of how AI, generative AI, as an example, can help our agents resolve issues faster, thus accelerating your time to resolution. But in doing so, what we did is we said, how can we ensure that as these AI features get integrated in our products, how can we come up with a set of principles that we can adopt as we build these AI features in our products and roll them out? And that set of principles is what we call as AI by design. And it's a set of 4 principles. The first one is around privacy and security. Second one is around trust and accountability. The third is around fairness. And the fourth is around simplicity and user experience. And what these four principles do is to provide a framework in terms of how the AI experiences that we're building in and how they're adopted can be thought about, so that there is a holistic consideration of, are we using AI for what they need to be, and are we using AI in a sustainable way where we can continue to build on the value they offer.
Yeah, we spoke about guardrails. AI by design principles are kind of our own internal guardrails to instruct our own product teams and engineering teams on how we want to think about those guardrails, similar to how a CIO might need to think about those guardrails. And so those principles, while we adopt them as our own, could be applied in a general sense for an IT leader.
Yeah, I think that's it's really important. And I'm personally really excited about the new features. I have seen them and they're great. But something that you pointed out, which I also think is important, is that those responses can be edited. And I think that the important thing to note about AI is it is there to help you, but it is not going to completely replace what you would be able to do, right? It will do what we're talking about. The case summarization alone will save so much time in responding to a ticket, right? If it gets transferred to another technician, if it gets escalated to somebody else, that ticket could have been open for 2 weeks and there's like 50 responses in there. Rather than having to read all of that, if something can summarize it for you, that'll save you a lot of time. So I think that's really important. But the writing responses to me is really interesting because it's something that I know a lot of people in IT struggle with, right? Communication is not necessarily their best feature. And some people are really good at it. And those people tend to progress quickly in the ranks, right? Because you can work really well. But something that I've heard a lot working with IT pros is like, can you help me with this? They'll ask for help or ask you to read an email before they send it to a customer or something like that. And that is beneficial because someone else can look at it. So the same kind of thing goes into this, right? You should read it before you send it off to somebody, right? Make sure that it makes sense. Make sure that it is covering all the points that need to be covered and has all the steps in it that need to be in there. Make sure that you're checking and balancing your AI, right? It's there to help you, but it is not there to do the complete job for you.
And that's where I think what you highlighted, Crystal, is where two of those principles become really, really relevant. The first one is having what we call as a human in the loop, right? That goes straight to our accountability principle, right? Where we want AI decisions to be validated. And can there be a human in the loop who can regulate those AI decisions before they become broadly used or become available to an end user, right? So in this case, as an example, when an agent is able to have the ability to look at the response, be able to edit them, test them for privacy, test them for fairness, right? Test them for language and the mode of communication. Like, these things are very important. And I think that's one aspect of the core principle. The second is that the simplicity and user experience of how these AI features are getting designed into our products, or even when IT leaders are rolling out AI experiences to their end users, that's a very, very important principle as well. Because what happens is, if you think of IT tools, we all build our users build their practices based on the capabilities of our tools. And IT practices require training. They need to be put in place, and they're audited for compliance reasons and multiple other reasons. So you can't just completely transform those experiences overnight because you have this shiny new capability. So one of the things that we put a lot of care into designing is the simplicity and user experience principle, where we believe AI features need to augment and help improve on existing experiences rather than introducing something completely left field and new, right? So both of those help with the adoption. They help build trust. And when you build trust, then you're further on the journey of AI adoption, going from diagnostic assistive to perhaps fully automated. So a lot of these principles, while they are addressing the risks of data privacy, they also are more encompassing and more holistic, because they think about how AI is being rolled out and adopted, and trust is building so that you can mature as an organization in the way you think about AI adoption.
Well, this has all been super exciting. We've talked about some of the current stuff. Some of our past AI features have been like the alert stack and the anomaly-based alerts. things like that have been placed in the products, right? We're using AI, we're using models to do the hard work for you, or some of the hard work for you, right? We can't do everything, but we're on our way. And I think this is really important, showcasing kind of the journey that we've had as a company in implementing AI into our products in a smart and targeted way. So can you share anything about our future plans with AI and technology?
Yeah, and hopefully you're able to see that we've been very prescriptive about how we're applying the use of our SolarWinds AI framework and our investments, generative AI. I'm really excited about how we're applying it moving forward. Sai's going to roll his eyes here because I always use these crazy analogies, but and if you think about observability or accelerating time to detection of issues and accelerating time to remediation of those issues, I kind of think about it like the human brain. And so are his eyes rolling yet? Which is the most powerful observability system on the planet ever created, if you think about it. You've got your subconscious and your consciousness. And we walk around the earth with our five senses, hearing and smelling and feeling and seeing stuff. So much noise in the environment around us. But our subconscious suppresses all that noise and provokes us and provokes our consciousness when something relevant happens. And then we wake up and turn our head. You're walking down the street and somebody yells out Michael, and if your name's not Michael, you literally didn't hear it and don't remember it. It's why they blow the cookie smell in the mall from the cookie store, right? It's literally to do that. And then you're provoked to act. And so from an observability standpoint, how we think about the job to be done or the problem that we're trying to solve amongst our observability solution and the problems that these IT ops teams are dealing with. When we think about AI and AI ops, anomaly detection and alert fatigue and reducing alert fatigue and noise, improving signal is really what we're focused on, and the reduction of noise. That's in large part allowing our IT ops professionals and that subconscious, so to speak, to only be provoked when there are relevant things to focus on. And we invest and think about that all the time in the spirit of simplicity, as Sai mentioned. Once it's provoked and it's a real issue, then we need to act. And so the other side of that, and the remediation side, is the acceleration of the incident lifecycle. And whether that's over into an ITSM system like our service desk solution, or integrating more deeply with root cause analysis and log assist, such that we can inherently build in a more accelerated incident response into that experience to kind of close the loop. And so, like the human brain, you suppress noise to be provoked to open your consciousness to then act and do something. That's kind of what we're all about with all this complexity that IT ops is dealing with. And so our investment in AI ops and generative AI is to do just that: suppress that noise, focus on the real problems, and then accelerate the time to remediate it, whether that's with assistive technology, Copilot, or whatever we want to call it, or the investment of incident correlation and further log pattern analysis and root cause analysis and event correlation. All those investments, the goal is to accelerate that cycle, the subconscious and consciousness, the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain, whatever you want to call it. And all of our investments in SolarWinds AI framework, our generative AI engine and how we apply it, all built for sustainability and following our AI by design principles, is to solve that problem and the big problem that IT ops deals with on a day-to-day basis.
Just to expand on that, so that's exactly how we're thinking about our AI products. There's SolarWinds AI, there's a generative AI engine, which is built carefully with AI by design principles, so that the three of them come together and are able to build out AI capabilities, whether that's to accelerate time to detect or time to remediate, and in synergy, so that to Cullen's point, we have this holistic application of AI across our products and experiences.
I love that. I actually really love that analogy. Often in sci-fi and all kinds of things, computers in general and computing technology has been compared to the human brain. So I really love that analogy. I thought it was really good. So we've talked about the AI by design principles quite a bit, and those are rather new or newly expressed to the public from us. And previously, we spent a lot of time and effort and thoughtfulness into creating the secure by design policies that I know we've kind of built off of the back of for everything afterwards, right? Everything afterwards, we've been using secure by design policies. So would you say that process of creating the secure by design framework and the thoughtfulness that went behind all of the security processes. And because AI does involve security and data integrity and all of that, would you say that informed or enhanced the process for creating the new AI by design principles and framework?
Absolutely. I mean, the foundational elements of some of those principles, that's what we build and extend from for everything. And AI by design for certain, and you can see some consistencies with some of the principles across both, and maybe I can touch on some of them, but by all means, you can kind of, if you draw it on a board, secure by design is at the foundation, and everything built from it, and AI by design inherits a lot of the principles that are built from it.
100%. So in SolarWinds, we've always believed in building simple, powerful, secure solutions, and secure by design is the inspiration for a lot of that. And same inspiration is what we derived when we conceived AI by design. One of the first principles of AI by design is around privacy and security. And data privacy, trust, and security are critical pieces of the puzzle that come together to make those principles realizable. Things like, for example, data isolation. How do you store and manage encrypted data? How is the access to that data managed? Do you have good access checks in place, as an example? Do you have good anonymization of personally identifiable information, and either anonymization or pseudonymization of that data before that data is offered or used by the language model, as an example? So all of these principles come together and kind of drive that principle around privacy and data security.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing all of this kind of enlightening information and our views as SolarWinds and as ourselves on AI and its role in IT. It's been really interesting.
You bet. Thanks for having us.
And thank you all so much for joining us and being active in the chat. We've had product experts hopefully answering all of your questions. And if you didn't get your questions answered, or if you wanted to continue the conversation, join us on social media or on our community site, thwack.com, to continue any of these AI conversations or talk about any of our features that are AI driven, that we've mentioned a few of them today. So you're welcome to go over there and ask more questions and talk more about it. We have our IT Trends Report 2024, which I have been referencing this whole time. And if you're interested in the results of that, that is published and will be linked in the chat for you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope we'll see you next SolarWinds Day.